Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Pei Aleph Amud Aleph, starting Daf Pei Amud Beis, a little bit more than third up from the bottom of the Amud. The Gemara brings the Mishnah in the Seifa. Now the Reish of the Mishnah had taught us that when it comes to Tumas Haguf, the tzitz is not meratzeh. However, the Seifa says that an exception to the rule, and that's Tumas Hatahoim. When there's tomb that comes from a place that's unknown. For example, a person is buried under a bunch of rubble, and another person then comes across such a mace, had no idea that he was walking above that mace, whereby he became tamei. That's considered to be tumas hatahoim, whereby such a tumas haguf, the tzitz is yes meratzeh. Says the Gemara. Boy Rami Bar Chama asked the following question: Kohen hamaratze b'korbos nosehen hutra loy b'tumas hatoim or loy? What about the kohen who's bringing the carbon? Does he have also this dispensation, this kula, whereby let's say he brings the carbon, afterwards it's discovered that he had tumas hatoim? Does that mean to say that he also has the tzitz as a meratzeh for him or not? The Gemara explains its question. Mi amrinan ki gemiri tumas hatahoim bebailim, bekoyin loy gemiri. That which we said that the tzitzis meratzeh tumas hatahoim is that only by the bailim that we have a Masora tradition for, but not a kohen. Or dilma bezvacha gemiri loishna bekoyin v'loishna bebailim. Or we do not make a distinction between the kohen or the bailim. And therefore, it is meratzeh. Omar Rave. Rave responds, Toshma, I'll bring you a proof. The Tani, Rabbi Chia taught the following brayso. Loi omru tumas hatahoim, ella lemeis bilvad. That which it says that there's a ritzui for tumas tahoim, that's only regards to the meis bilvad. That's what Rabbi Chia taught. The Gemara explains, meis lemeute mai. What does that come to exclude? Lav le'mute tumas hatoim hasheretz does not come to exclude where a person had no idea that there was a sheretz, a dead carcass of a sheretz, of one of the shmona shrotzim, that was buried underneath a mound of rubble, and then he puts, let's say, his hand, and lo and behold, he had touched this sheretz. What are we talking about? If we're talking about the bailim himself, ubeman, who are we referring to? Ibn Nazir, mimahanibe. If it's a Nazir that we said in the Mishnah that the Nazir and the one who's bringing the Karban Pesach, the tzitz is meratzeh for tumas hatahoim. So in regards to the Nazir, it has no bearing if it's tumas hasheretz. It's only one who is a Nazir who comes in contact with a mace, whether he does so b'shoyig or b'mezid, as the following pasuk indicates, ki yamus meis alov omarachmana. And therefore, it won't make any difference if the Nazir becomes in contact with tumas sheretz. That's not going to then reverse his account of his nazirus, and therefore it won't affect him. Ela ba'oise pesach. Rather, he must be talking about somebody who's making a carbon pesach. So that's very good, according to the one who says that we do not make a carbon pesach for somebody who's tamei sheretz. But elaman da omer sheichtim v'zarkin al tamei sheretz hash tumas yedua hutra loy tumas hatahoim lokol shekein. If we do, the other man Omer says that we make somebody who is now tumas sheretz, who whereby he can then go ahead and become tohor by the time nightfall comes, thereby he can eat the Karban Pesach at night. We will bring a Karban Pesach for him even now on Yud Daled when he's in a state of Tumas Sheretz. If that's the case, when it's Yadua that he has Tumas Sheretz, then certainly when it comes to the case of Tumas Hatahoim, there we certainly will allow that to be, and therefore we don't need the case of Tumas Hatahoim to refer to that person. Rather, now we can bring a proof that it is referring to the kohen as well, that the kohen himself has this kula of tumas hatahoim. Ushmamina hutroloi tumas atahoim. Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says you have no proof. We're talking about the Bailim, and we're talking about him bringing a Korban Pesach. We asked just before, if that's the case, what are the Manda Omar who says that you can bring a Korban Pesach for somebody who's Tumas Sheretz? Says the Gemara, La'umute Tumas Hatayim Deziva. We're coming to exclude that which it says that somebody who has Tumas Meis and Tumas Tahaim has the dispensation, but that comes to exclude the Tuma of Tahaim of a Ziva. And therefore, it's no proof that we're talking about a Kohen. Indeed, we're talking about the Bailim. Ask the Gemara, Tumas Tahaim Deziva loy meratze? Does the tzitz not meratze on Tumas Tahaim Deziva? Vehatanya, behold, it indicates otherwise in the following brisa. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Shomeres Yoim Kineged Yoim Sheshachtoi Vizarkoi Aleha B'Sheni Shelo. Here it states in the brisa you have a Shomeres Yoim Kineged Yoim. This is a woman who has seen a coming out, she has seen blood, not during the days of her menstruation, but rather one of those 11 days of Ziva. And therefore she then looks to see a complete day to then correspond, that's going to be clean, that corresponds to that day that she saw the blood. So it states over here, Shomer Yom Keneged Yom Shashachtu Vizarku Aleh B'Sheni Shelo. She's now in her second day, and that's Yudalid B'Nisan. So now, she at this point has not yet seen. Right now, so far the day has gone by and she's still clean. So it states over here, we can shech the Korban Pesach on her behalf, even though it's not clear what will then ensue for the rest of the afternoon, whether she will see blood or not. So it states over here, Ve'achar kach ro'oso, we're on top of Pei Aleph Amud Aleph. Afterwards, however, she does see in that afternoon, after they shechted the Korban Pesach on her behalf. So it states the din is Eino Eicheles Upetura Mela'asos Pesach Sheni. She does not eat the Korban Pesach because she's in the state of Tuma, but it was valid for the Korban Pesach to be brought on her behalf, and therefore it's considered that she was Yotza, her obligation of bringing a Korban Pesach. She does not have to bring Korban Pesach Sheni. My taima, the Gemara asks, why is this so? La mishum de meratze tzitz. Is it not because the tzitz is meratze for her, and therefore she does have now a valid Korban Pesach? She doesn't have to bring Korban Pesach Sheni. Amrei, they said, loy mishum de ksova Rabbi Yossi mikanu lahabo hi metame. The reason why over here she's yotze with the Korban Pesach Rishon when they shechted on her behalf, even though subsequently she sees on that afternoon further a re'iyah, nonetheless, because Rabbi Yossi holds only mikanu lahabo is she's a state of tuma. That means to say that mitzas hayoim kekuloi, since the beginning of the day she was already in a state of cleanliness, so we consider the entire day cleanly, whereby when the Korban Pesach was brought, she was considered to be in a state of cleanliness, and it's valid. That which she saw subsequently in the later part of that day, that only begins a new count, mikanu lahabo. I asked the Gemara Vatanya, Rabbi Yossi Omer. Rabbi Yossi says, Zov, Baal Shtei Re'iyos, a male Zov who sees twice, Sheshachtu V'zarko Alov B'shvi Shaloi, he has to count 7 clean days, and on the 7th day, which comes out to be Yudalid Ben Nisan, they check the Korban Pesach on his behalf. And then he sees later on in that day. In a similar case, Shomer is Yom Keneged Yom Sheshachtu V'zarko Alov B'sheni Shalo. A Shomer is Yom, who's then looking to see a clean day to correspond to the previous day that she saw. We Zarek the dam on her behalf. That means the Korban Pesach is her second day, comes out to be Yudal Ben Nisan, the same case that we saw before. And then she saw subsequently that afternoon on Yudalid, after they shech the Korban Pesach on her behalf. Hare Elu metamin mishkav u'moishav l'mafreya. Behold, these are metamim. they have the status of being metame, mishkav, and moishav, even the mafreya, which means if they had come in contact with any couch or any layer that they were sitting on, for example, then the entire couch, all of the layers, even if they didn't come in contact directly with, would become tamei. Upeturi melasas pesach sheni, and it states over here they would reporter both the zov and the ziv in this case from bringing a korban pesach sheni. They were yotze with the pesach rishon that was shechted on their behalf. Amrei my limafreya. So why is it then that you're saying that indeed they're yotze? Hare, you're telling me mikanu laba. Here we see that they're metame moshav mishkav limafreya. Answer the more my limafreya midrabanan. Midyaraisa, they're not mafreya. They're not metame, because midyaraisa we say mitzvah hayom kil kuloi. That's shita Rabbi Yossi, and therefore midyaraisa they were yotze their korban pesach as well. Only in regards to them being metame moshav mishkav, that's going to be midrabanan, and that's why they're metame limafreya. Says the Gemara, "Va'af Rabbi Oshaya sover metam le'afrei midrabon." And the Gemara now wants to show that even Rabbi Oshaya will also hold the shita that the Moshav umishkav is metama midrabanon le'mafreya. The Tanya, Rabbi Oshaya Omer. Here it states that Rabbi Oshaya he didn't teach in a brisa, but he taught the following, which is based on a Mishnah: Aval zov shera bashvi sheloi soise esh Shalafonov, a Zav that saw on his seventh day. So the Tanakama over here says, or that Rav Shaya is explaining, he says that Rav Shaya is going with the opinion that he was soiser all of the days before. In other words, he's supposed to see 7 clean days. On the 7th day, he sees an emission. So therefore, it's soiser all of the rest of the days. It unravels everything that he saw until now, and therefore he has to start to count anew. Omar le Rabbi Yochanan heard that Rabbi Shaya said this, and he argued. He says, "Lo yistar ela yoimoy." He only is soiser that day. The Gemara wants to understand Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. What do you mean he's only soiser that day? Either he was soiser, meaning the entire days, which is what Rabbi Shaya said, or he wasn't soiser at all, and now he has to now count anew. Mikanu la'abo, and that's what the Gemara asked. Mimanav shach. If you want to say it's metame lemafreya, then afilu kulu nister. Then, like Rabbi Shaya said, then all of it is nister from the beginning. If you want to say from now onwards, then hu metame, then yoimanami lo nister. Then that day also was a nister, because that day also is considered to be mitzvahs yomake kuloi, whereby if he does see, which he did later on, it's like a din of a keri, whereby a balkari he goes to the mikvah and becomes tohor that night. Ella emol lo yistor v'lo yoimoy. Rather, if the say Rabbi Yochanan was meaning to say he's not soiser, and not even that day, like we said, he's like a balkari. V'omale Rabbi Yossi koi kavaseich. And he said, Rabbi Shaya to Rabbi Yochanan, he says to him that indeed Rabbi Yossi holds like you. But we said in the name of Rabbi Yossi that he is yes metame Moshav Mishkav Levafreya. Elo lav shmamina metame Levafreya midrabanon shmamina. Rather, we can prove, as we said before, that which Rabbi Yossi says is metame Moshav Mishkav Levafreya. It's only midrabanon. Midyaraisa we say mitzas hayoim kekuloi, and therefore, indeed, as we said before, the cases before, the korban pesach rishon was valid. Ask the Gemara, the Rabbi Yossi hashta da omar mikanu lahabohu metame. According to Rabbi Yossi, does say mikanu lahabo lemeis bilvad lemuute mai. So what did we mean before when we said that only then the tumas hatahoim lemeis does the tzitz meratze? What does that come to exclude? Says the Gemara, nifshoit mino de bekoyin v'hutra loy tumas hatahoim. Let us say that indeed that is referring to the kohen, and indeed the tumas hatahoim would also meratze on behalf of the kohen. Amre, they said, La'olam be'bailim u'bepesach. You have no proof for the kohen because indeed we can talk about the bailim u'bepesach. We said before there's a machlokes whether a person who then has tumas sheretz, you can go ahead and shech the kohen pesach on his behalf or not. Says the Gemara, v'ksavra ein sheichtim v'zarkin al tmei sheretz v'itzrach lemu'ute. This is going like that opinion who says you cannot shecht a kohen pesach for somebody who's tumas sheretz, and therefore this comes to exclude the tumas hatahoim for him. Now the Gemara comes back and asks the obvious question according to Rabbi Yossi. If indeed he's saying that he's only coming to then become Tamei Mikanu Lahaba because Miktas Yom Kikuloi, so then El Rabbi Yossi Zava Gemura Hechi Mishkachasla. How can you ever have a case where a Zava becomes a Zava Gemura, a Zava Gedola by seeing 3 consecutive days? Hare, if it's Mikanu Lahaba, then whatever was until now Miktas Yom Kikuloi, now we only start from now onwards. So you can never get 3 days consecutively. So what does he mean? Answers the Gemara, uveshoifas. We're talking about a woman whose flow is a continuous flow. Therefore, it continuously flows 3 days consecutively. That's a situation where it becomes a Zava Gedola. If you want, I'll say an additional type of answer to explain how even Rabbi Yossi can come out to have a Zava Gedola, even though he holds Mikanu Lahabo. Kigoin Sherosa Kol Sheni Bein Hashmoshos. That means to say that the woman sees in the beginning of the day, the day ends, and then there's Bein Hashmoshos. So right before the day, she had seen, and then going into the Bein Hashmoshos, whereby if she then had that first day right before the Bein Hashmoshos, so that was already going to be considered to be entering the Bein Hashmoshos the next day in a state of Tumah. She never had Mitzvahs Yom Kikuloi. So therefore, if she sees a second day after that, so then when she sees it also Bein Hashmoshos at the beginning of the day and then into the Bein Hashmoshos, she also has the same situation. So it would come out like this. If you have a situation where, let's say today is Yom Rishon, and Yom Rishon enters the Bein Hashmoshos, the beginning of the Bein Hashmoshos she sees, whereby the entrance of Monday will also then be when she then sees. So then, therefore, that's the beginning of that Monday, she has already had mitzvahs yom is not kikuloi because she has never become clean. Whereby the Monday, then the Bein Hashmoshos entering Tuesday is the same thing. So therefore, she never had the beginning of Tuesday for herself to also be mitzvahs yom kikuloi, whereby she has then seen both Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, 3 consecutive days, making a Zava Gedola.